was laced into white and terror when the text landed like a stone in my throat. I can't walk you down the aisle. Marissa's event is too important. I'll try for the reception. The bridal suite tilted. The veil on the chair looked suddenly ridiculous. The mirror, a stranger. My breath became a fist. Glass flutes chimed as my phone hit the wall and skittered to the carpet. Somewhere outside, the quartet rehearsed. Inside me, something old and fragile cracked and would not settle. They asked what happened, and I could only force out 2 words that tasted like rust my father. 3 hours before the ceremony, he was choosing my sister's celebration over the promise he'd made when I was 13, and our mother was lowered into silence. Back then, his grief had wrapped me like a coat, and he'd sworn, "You and I, we're a team now." For years, I tailored my life to fit that sentence. I believed it again 9 months ago at his kitchen table, when he pressed my knuckles and said nothing would make him prouder than walking me toward a new life with Ethan. The believing is what burns. Melanie, our planner, softened her voice and offered options that felt like splinters and uncle. Perhaps, or walking alone. Alone rattled in my skull until my phone lit up with Uncle Martin's name, the man who attended every recital, every late-night pickup, every milestone my father misfiled. His voice arrived warm and steady. He knew. He was angry for me. And then he asked, not pitying, but reverent, if I would allow him the honor. Something inside me uncrouched. 20 minutes, he said. And all at once, the room had oxygen again. Relief pressed in at the edges. But fate wasn't finished. Jessica, mascara wand arrested midair, handed me her phone. A mistake had delivered her a string of messages 3 weeks old. Marissa strategizing to keep Dad to herself on my wedding day, promising to make sure he chose her. It wasn't a sudden failure of love. It was a pattern with fingerprints. I was 13 in a black dress again, watching my sister slide into the seat beside our father and rearrange the orbit of the house. I was 19 at the scholarship ceremony, scanning for his face that never appeared because someone told him my nerves didn't want him there. The hurt was layered, a geological cross-section of almost and if-onlys. Catherine arrived like cool water on burnt skin. Ethan's mother crossed the room, gathered my hands, and spoke like someone who had lived through this brand of absence. When she told me her father had refused to witness her interfaith marriage, the tilt of the world shifted. She didn't romanticize forgiveness or simplify it into a polite nod. She named the cost of chasing approval that will not turn around. Her question slid under my defenses. Will you let them keep breaking your heart? In her house, I had learned the shape of steady care, Gregory pulling out a chair, Catherine remembering the dessert I mentioned once in spring. Decency as habit, not performance. Standing in that suite, I understood the difference between love that shows up and love that needs prompting. My phone buzzed with Ethan's text, "Whatever you need," even if we wait, and gratitude rose so fast it stung. I didn't want to wait. The day wasn't a scoreboard of who attended. It was a covenant with the man whose steady had become my weather. When Uncle Martin arrived, breathless and sure, he looked at me the way fathers look at daughters in movies. He carried a small velvet box that opened onto a strand of pearls his mother wore in 1952. "Family isn't always genetic," he said without saying it, fastening that history at the base of my throat. He told me a story while the photographer reworked her chart, a young Martin in a cap and gown, scanning bleachers for a father who never came because a son's choice to teach wounded a man's expectations. Years later, forgiveness found them, but the ceremony remained empty space. That is how absence works. It stays, even when peace does too. He pressed a handkerchief embroidered with my mother's initials into my palm and said she would be proud. The cloth smelled faintly of lavender, as if time sometimes bends when we need it most. We practiced the walk in the quiet chapel, where stained glass scattered light like confetti. With each crossing, panic loosened a notch. My heart recognized the honest weight of his arm. I told him the fear anyway, that today would calcify into a story about who didn't come. Then we rehearsed something different, a memory worth keeping. Outside, guests drifted to their seats. Inside, the clock slid toward the hour, and I decided not to measure my life against my father's wavering. Melanie reworked the timeline with the quick mercy of a professional. Jessica and Tara rescued my makeup. Catherine's steady presence turned my breath from jagged to usable. When the suite finally stilled, my phone vibrated with my father's name. He asked me to reschedule for the family's convenience. I told him the truth without embroidery. I didn't make him choose. He made his choice. Then I ended the call before I reopened the wound. Pain does not own the whole day when courage asks for a corner. I lifted my chin, touched the pearls, and chose the story I would tell about this hour of my life. When the quartet's melody shifted and the doors cracked open, Uncle Martin offered his arm. I took it as if it had always been waiting there. The doors opened, and the light struck me like a benediction. Guests rose to their feet, chairs creaking, a collective murmur sweeping across the garden as Uncle Martin and I stepped into the aisle. Rose petals trembled in the breeze, the string quartet pouring music into the air. Each step felt like peeling away a layer of doubt, revealing something steadier underneath. Martin's arm was solid beneath my hand, his pace even, his presence grounding me against the quiver in my knees, halfway down. I found Ethan's face. He was crying openly, not out of pity, but with something richer gratitude, pride, the kind of love that steadies rather than consumes. The sight of him waiting was like finding the horizon after years of clouds. At the altar, Martin placed my hand in Ethan's with a quiet dignity that silenced the ache of absence. The officiant acknowledged the unusual substitution, naming aloud what I had begun to understand. Some bonds are forged by blood, others by choice, and both can be sacred. I didn't look for my father among the guests. Empty chairs have their own kind of presence, but they no longer dictated my worth. Instead, I focused on Ethan's trembling fingers as he slid the ring onto mine, on the vows that felt less like promises and more like truths we were already living. When the kiss sealed it, the applause thundered, and Martin remained nearby, a sentinel of loyalty. The reception shimmered with fairy lights and the scent of garden roses. We were introduced not simply as Mr. and Mrs. Ethan Carter, but escorted by our beloved Uncle Martin. The applause nearly lifted the roof. For the first time in hours, I laughed, unguarded and whole. The father-daughter dance loomed like another reminder of what was missing, but Martin stepped forward without hesitation. "Just for a minute," he said. We swayed to "What a Wonderful World," and I felt my shoulders unlock. "Thank you," I whispered. "No need for thanks among family," he answered, voice thick with unshed tears. Ethan cut in gracefully, spinning me toward our future, his hands steady as anchors. But the day wasn't finished with me. A commotion at the doorway caught my eye. My father, Robert, stood there in a suit that fit like borrowed clothes, scanning the room with uneasy eyes. Ethan murmured, "He came after all." "Too late," I said, and to my surprise, the words carried no heat, only clarity. Some moments cannot be retrieved once lost. Robert lingered at the edge, watching laughter ripple around tables he hadn't joined. I focused instead on Ethan, on Catherine's warm hand on my shoulder, on Martin standing like a guard near the bar. My new family pulsed with life around me, making absence small. Later, the crystalline tap of silverware quieted the hall as Ethan raised his champagne flute for a toast. Laughter softened, eyes turned toward us. I felt a tap on my shoulder. "Ariana." My father's voice intruded. He stood there, hair mussed, tie askew, carrying an apology like a shield. "You made it," I said. My voice flat. Traffic was brutal. He explained, gesturing vaguely. "I was getting married," I replied, the words sharp enough to slice the excuse before I could step away. Cousin Daniel appeared with his phone. He had evident screenshots of Marissa's group chats. Photos of her laughing in a bar at 4:30 p.m., the exact time I was walking down the aisle. Messages where she bragged about making Dad choose her, about shifting dates to sabotage my wedding. Proof laid bare on a glowing screen. The color drained from Robert's face as the truth crashed down. He stammered that he hadn't realized. "I asked the only question that mattered if you had known. Would you have chosen differently?" Silence stretched. Guests had turned, listening, discomfort rippling through the room. Robert straightened, announcing an apology like a public statement. "Not here," I said firmly. "Not now," he insisted. But the word "no" rose from me like a pillar. "You made your choice weeks ago. Now, I'm making mine. The invisible strings tethering me to his approval snapped in that moment. I felt their absence like phantom limbs, painful. Yes, but liberating. I walked back to Ethan, to Catherine's steady presence, to Gregory's proud nod, to Martin's hand on my back. My father remained at the edge, smaller than I'd ever seen him. Martin guided him toward the bar with quiet words. She deserves this day without further drama. Tomorrow. Maybe. Tonight belongs to her. And so it did. I chose to dance, to laugh, to live inside the warmth of those who showed up. Some wounds would take time to heal. Some conversations would have to wait. But tonight, I was no longer defined by who failed me. I was claimed by those who stood. The night closed like a book, but its story lingered. For the first time in my life, I did not measure myself against my father's gaze. I measured myself against the arms that held me, the hands that steadied me, the faces that smiled because they chose to be there. Ethan and I danced until the soles of my shoes throbbed, until laughter burned my throat. When the music softened and guests trickled home, Martin pressed a kiss to my forehead and whispered, "You're not alone, sweetheart." I believed him. The months that followed were not easy. Silence stretched long between my father and me, broken only by the occasional awkward message. But silence is sometimes mercy. It allows wounds to scab. Ethan and I built our first year like carpenters, piece by careful piece. Thanksgiving at the Carter's table, Christmas wrapped in ribbons and warmth. Easter spent teaching me how to hide eggs for children not yet born. Martin became our fixture, folding easily into the Carter rhythms, his laughter indistinguishable from theirs. It was not until the 4th of July that Robert returned in earnest. He showed up with a store-bought potato salad, apologies folded into every gesture, nearly setting the grill on fire in his nervousness. I let him stay. Let him pass plates. Let him take pictures as fireworks bloomed overhead. He did not ask for forgiveness that night. He simply tried to belong. And for once, I let him try. Marissa drifted to Florida, her messages sporadic, her presence like a shadow on the periphery. She sent a card when Ethan and I announced my pregnancy, just a few words. Polite but distant. I felt no sting this time, only a strange relief that the power she once wielded over my life was fading like smoke. My energy bent toward the life growing inside me, toward the home Ethan and I were shaping. One golden autumn morning, Catherine hosted our first anniversary gathering at her house. The sun streamed through bay windows, catching the curve of my belly beneath my dress. Gregory unveiled a photo album, filled with moments from that first-year Thanksgiving laughter. Christmas ornaments, Easter dinners, and one particularly chaotic summer barbecue where Martin taught Ethan to carve ham. Page after page of chosen family, stitched together not by obligation, but by presence. Uncle Martin, his hair grayer now, his smile as steady as ever, cleared his throat from his chair by the fireplace. He handed us a parcel wrapped in tissue. Inside was a baby blanket, cream yarn woven into delicate patterns. Alice knitted it before she passed. He said, his voice catching, she wanted it saved for the next generation. I traced the stitches with trembling fingers. It felt like a bridge between past and future, a love carried forward. The doorbell rang. Ethan returned with my father, awkward in the doorway, holding a worn photo album like an offering. He apologized for being late traffic on the bridge. The same excuse that once would have gutted me. This time, I only nodded. We're looking at photos. Come join us. He sat cautiously at the edge of the sofa and opened the album. Inside were pictures I had never seen my mother pregnant with me, her hand curved protectively over her belly. His voice was low, nearly breaking. I'm sorry I wasn't there when it mattered most. I can't change the past, but I'd like to be here for your future, for my granddaughter's future. I didn't promise forgiveness. I didn't promise anything more than a hand offered, tentative, in return. One day at a time, I said, and that was enough for now. Later, as we gathered for a group photo, I stood between worlds, Ethan's steady arm around me, Martin's gentle presence on the other side, my father hesitantly edging into the circle. I placed a hand on my growing belly, feeling the faint flutter of life within. This child would know what loyalty meant, not because of words spoken in grief, but because of choices lived in presence. Catherine set the timer, and the shutter clicked, freezing us into a portrait of family, some by blood, some by choice, all bound by promises kept. I had chased my father's approval for 17 years, rearranging myself around his absence, measuring my worth against his indifference. But life had taught me a sharper truth. Family is not who claims the title, but who shows up when the hour matters most. Sometimes, if you are very lucky. Those who failed you may seek a second chance. Sometimes, the door opens, but whether or not it does, you are not required to keep waiting at the threshold. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more. And tell me in the comments who in your life has shown you what real family means.